The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone to Nova 401k Associates webinar. I failed my 2021 ADP test. What can I do for 2022 with Steve Vest? Before we get started, I would like to point out the panel on the top right-hand corner of your screen. You will see a drop-down section for questions. This is where you will enter in any questions you may have for Steve. Keep in mind that the Q&A portion of this webinar will be held at the end, and Steve will answer as many questions as time permits. Please be sure to make your questions as descriptive as possible, including the slide number if that's possible. If time runs out and you still have questions, please send them to our email address, webinars@nova401k.com. Right below questions, you will also see handouts, the handouts drop down. Here you will be able to download today's material. If you're with us today to earn continued education credits, please be sure to stay until the end to fill out our survey. This will allow us to track your time and participation. Certificates will be sent out within a week for those who met the time requirement. To view any webinars you may have missed and the recording of this session, you can follow us on our YouTube channel, which is Nova 401k Associates, or visit our website, which is www.nova401k.com/webinars. Thank you for joining us today. I would now like to introduce you to Nova's Vice President and Shareholder, Steve Vest.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for the delay. Of course, we would be having network issues right when I'm supposed to do this webinar. So luckily, we're able to resolve some of the problems here. Again, our webinar today is about ADP testing and what you can do for 2022. And we'll explain exactly what ADP testing is to you. I know we like to use acronyms in our industry a lot. I am working actually off the same slide deck that you guys are, so we'll just scroll through. Again, just a quick disclaimer that you don't want to use what we're talking about today to substitute for legal advice, and you should consult a qualified accountant or attorney if you need tax or legal advice. Also, if you need the CPA credit, our provider number is 009820. You need to have registered individually, be present for the whole webinar, and then return the evaluation form. That'll be available after the end of the webinar, and then we'll give you a certificate within a week. So on the agenda today, we'll have a quick introduction about the ADP testing, talk about how you solve some of these testing problems, in addition to some solutions in terms of plan design, which are the safe harbor plans, and then some other MidYear testing services we provide that can give you some insight as to how your plan is doing before the year ends, which can help you make some decisions and communicate with your employees. And then certain plan amendments and testing elections that can be used in our plan documents to sometimes help alleviate some of the testing issues. So firstly, we want to teach you again about what the ADP test is and how the refunds work, and understand some of the options that are available in terms of how to minimize refunds, and then also talk about some of the safe harbor plan designs that can actually exempt you from the testing altogether. Also like to start at the beginning talking about some of the roles and responsibilities and the service model that we have most of our clients utilizing. Again, it's what we like to call an unbundled model, meaning that we've got different parties providing their expertise and services to provide the total package of service to your plan. All right, but in any 401k arrangement, there are typically 4 distinct roles that have to be played by somebody. We've got the plan sponsor, which is basically your company that decides you want to have a plan. You're responsible for sending in the contributions and setting up the deductions and payroll. Again, sending the contributions to who? It would be the investment provider, right? So we deal with several partner firms. I'm not sure which ones are yours, but Hancock, Voya, Empower, Principal, we deal with quite a few partner firms to provide the investment platform. So this is the company that maintains the 1-800 number, the internet access, and the mutual fund investment lineup that your participants are able to access and move their money around in. Then you also have to have a TPA. That's what Nova is, a third-party administration firm. So we specialize purely in the compliance work dealing with the two main governmental agencies that monitor these plans, the IRS and the Department of Labor. So we maintain and help you design and draft your legal plan document, which is the document that outlines the actual legal provisions, the waiting period, the vesting schedule, all the provisions that make your plan unique. We also prepare 4 or 5 different non-discrimination tests each year that are mandated by the IRS. There's also an annual filing that we prepare that has to be filed with the Department of Labor. And then we provide ongoing plan consulting. So think of us almost like we're the technical, almost CPAs that deal with your plan. We're not really a CPA firm, but you know, that would be the closest analogy. And then, of course, neither the TPA or the investment provider can actually provide investment advice to you and your participants. And so that's typically where your investment and financial advisor comes into play. They'll help with enrollment meetings, providing investment education and monitoring of the investments within your plan for reasonableness and the fees. And so that's kind of the model we're using here at Nova when we partner with other firms to provide the service package. So getting right into it, an introduction on you know, 401k plans and the fact that they're highly regulated by these two agencies we just talked about. And they're regulated because 401k plans do provide preferential tax treatment. So the contributions that both the employees and the employers make to the plan are tax deferred, meaning you'll pay the taxes on it later, but both parties get a tax deduction now. And so there's a you know, big financial and tax benefit to having a 401k plan. And for that reason, the IRS makes you follow a lot of rules, which we'll get into just a portion of those today. Some terminology that we'll be using in the rest of the presentation. If we talk about HCEs, that stands for highly compensated employee, or an NHCE is a non-highly compensated employee. ADP stands for average deferral percentage test, and we'll talk about what that is in a moment. And QNEC stands for qualified non-elective employer contribution, and we'll also talk about what that means. As I said before, there are several non-discrimination tests that the IRS mandates plans pass on an annual basis. We're only going to be talking about the ADP and the ACP test today, but there are as many as 6 or 7 that a plan has to comply with every year. And these are tests that Nova runs for you and on your plan's behalf to make sure that you comply with all these rules. So the ADP test, what is that? So, you know, a common question we get from employees from time to time, especially highly compensated employees, is, you know, that they realize or have researched on Google that they can contribute up to $19,500, and somehow they manage to do that and get a refund from the plan. So they ask questions about why they can't contribute that much, right? And the reason is because of the ADP test. All right, this average deferral percentage test is a participation test, essentially, that is designed to demonstrate that the plan does not discriminate in favor of the highly compensated employees with regard to their employee deferral rates. Okay, we'll go through the mechanics of the test here in a moment. But if this test is failed, there are only a limited number of ways you can fix the failure. And the most popular and common way is to refund a portion of the highly compensated employees' contribution money, their employee contributions, back to them. In addition, this is not as popular a solution, but the employer can choose to contribute more employer money that would otherwise be counted as an employee contribution. That's what a QNEC is, and we'll go into more detail about that. But that solution involves the company coming up with more money to give the non-highly compensated employees. Most companies do not opt for that particular solution, or it could be a combination of the two: refunds and coming up with more money, more employer money. So, in terms of the ADP test mechanics, first we have to determine which employees are in this test. Then we'll go through these steps one by one, right? But there's basically 6 separate steps to get to the end of the testing and possible curing of a failure or solving of the failure, right? And if you're on this call right now, it's because your plan at some point last year failed the ADP test and had to issue refunds. So we've tried to identify which plans are problem plans and invite you to this webinar. The first step is, who is in this test, okay? So basically, the test includes all the employees who are eligible to participate. Doesn't matter if they actually participate, right? So it's going to include all the people that have made an election to participate and the people who are not choosing. They just have to be eligible. So you've got your zeros in there with your actual contributors, all right? It also includes anybody that might have terminated and was eligible during the year, but terminated before the end of the year. So think about your entire employee group that's eligible at any point during the year is in this test. So the next thing we have to do, we have to divide the company or this group into 2 groups, the highly compensated group and the non-highly compensated group, all right? Now, who is a highly compensated employee? So there's a couple of things that can make you one. One is a compensation test. So anyone that made more than $130,000 in 2021 would be highly compensated for 2022, which is the year we're in now. So whether you're highly paid or not is based on how much you actually made in the preceding year. So if you failed your 2021 test, your highlies are based on how much they made in 2020. Now, why does the IRS do it this way? They want you to know who your highly paid individuals are going into a year. So you know in advance who your highly paid people are. Again, anybody that grossed more than 130 in 2021 will be highly paid for this year that we're in now. Also, if you're a greater than 5% direct owner of the company who's actually working there, right? It doesn't matter how much you make, you're going to be a highly compensated employee. So you could be the owner just drawing 100,000. You're still going to be a highly paid employee. So that's a whole separate category. And then if you're a family member of the direct owner, specific family members being spouses, children, parents also get pulled into this, then those individuals, those family members are going to be highly compensated employees as well through what we call attribution of ownership, because they're related to the owner. All right. Everyone else is a non-highly compensated employee, every other eligible person. So also this $130,000 compensation limit from year to year can be increased over time and has been. Currently, it is at the 130 level. It just changed to 135, but that limit will not affect any testing until the 2023 year. So, all right. The next step is we have to, so we've divided the company into 2 groups, And now we have to figure out the percentage of compensation that each employee contributed, the individual percentage. All right, so if I have an employee who contributes $10,600 in pre-tax deferrals or Roth, actually in this case, plus an additional $5,000 in Roth, and they made $130, then we add the Roth and the pre-tax together and divide by 130, and that individual deferred or contributed at a 12% rate. So, pretty straightforward. We figure out the individual rate, and then we have to average the rates for each group. All right, so again, numerically, it looks like this. Let's just say I had 2 highly compensated and 2 non-highly compensated in a small plan, and I have one highly contributing 12% and the other 0. Again, the average is you just take the total and divide by 2 and come up with 6. So that's how you compute an average. Same thing for the non-highlies. One is at 6 and one is at 0, so that average is 3%. So we determine the average of the 2 groups. Then we have to compare these averages together, and they have to be within a certain limit. All right? So in general, the spread or the difference between the non-highly compensated average and the highly compensated average can only be 2 percentage points. All right, so if you look at this chart, if the non-highlies are at 2%, then you add 2% to that, and the maximum average deferral rate is going to be 4%, and so forth and so on, right? 3 and 5, 4 and 6. You'll notice here that this is not adding 2. If the average of the non-highlies is under 2%, you actually multiply by 2. Okay, but once you get to 2% or above, you're adding 2%. Either way, there's this limit, this spread that's allowable, and if you're beyond the spread, you're going to have to fix the problem by refunding, generally. Okay. So again, if we have an example here, right, and actually in the previous example, the plan fails, right, because the average of the non-highlies was 3 and the highlies was 6. So we add 2 to 3, and it should be 5. They're at 6, so we're 1% over in this example we just gave. That would be a fail. So how do we fix that fail? Again, we have a couple of options, but we have to refund the money, and we'll go through how that works here in a moment. But basically, what is the IRS doing here? Like, why even have this test? Well, they do not, again, want the highly compensated employees to benefit disproportionately more than the non-highlies. So they're trying to find ways to entice the owners and the highly compensated people that run the company to do something on behalf of the non-highlies. Okay. Otherwise, if they're just going to sit around and do nothing, then they themselves will be limited as well. You see, so what are they trying to entice? Well, there's only 2 ways to pass this test. Either you refund money or cure this test, or somehow you increase the participation rates of the non-highlies, right? You want to bring them up. How might I do this? I might choose to make an employer match, right? If I'm going to match as an employer a certain percent, again, to entice my non-highlies to contribute, I might decide to do that, right? If it weren't for this test, what would a lot of companies do? They'd have no match at all, right? It's like, why should I give any money away? Is quite often the response of an owner. Not always. I'm not saying they're bad people or anything, but in general, owners, if they didn't have to give away free money, they wouldn't, right? So, so there's a few options. The plan could also, become a safe harbor plan, which we'll talk about that later, but a safe harbor plan is a type of design and matching formula that exempts the plan from this particular test entirely. Okay. or the employer could make an employer QNEC, which is basically an additional employer contribution to the plan, which we would count as an employee contribution to raise the average of the non-highlies and get the plan to pass. But your options are fairly limited once a plan fails. So if we do have to refund, which is what most plans do, right? So some of the highlies are going to get money back. That money is taxable in the year that it is actually refunded. Okay, so nobody has to go back and refile their tax returns, or there's no redoing of the W-2 forms, right? It's just that a 1099 would be issued by your investment provider, right? So a lot of you probably had your refunds issued before March 15th this year, and were contacted by Nova. And the reason we're shooting for March 15th is that if we miss that deadline for refunding money for a failed test, then your company has to pay a 10% excise tax on the refund amount, and we don't want that to happen. So we're trying to avoid that problem. But since the refunds were issued in 2022, they're taxable in 2022, and John Hancock or Voya or whoever you're with is going to issue your highlies a 1099 showing the refund amount is taxable in 2022. All right. Now, who do the refunds go to? They go to the highly compensated employees who contributed the most in terms of dollars. And we'll show some examples of how that works. Again, sometimes you might have questions from your highlies about, well, why am I getting the refund, right? How does that work? Now, we don't expect you to understand that in excruciating detail. You can always call your Nova account manager, but this is informational in case you're interested as plan administrators of your own plan. Also, the refunds are adjusted for catch-up contributions. Again, we will talk about how this works. So in terms of how the refund process actually works, it's a two-step process. First, you calculate the initial amount of the refund based on the highly compensated employee who contributed the highest percentage, okay? But then once that total dollar amount is determined, it's then refunded from the highly compensated employees who contributed the highest dollar amount. All right. Now, what does that mean? What does that look like? Here's an example. So we have some highly compensated employees here who are getting refunds, right? So the first step of the calculation is the highlies that contributed at the highest percentage. So if we look at this percentage column, these are the people that are going to cause the refund and determine this dollar amount. All right. So if $3,500 in total is needed to be refunded to solve the testing failure, that $3,500 then gets refunded back to the person who contributed the highest dollar amount, which is John. He had the lowest percentage, but because he put in $19,500, he gets all of the $3,500. So these guys caused the failure, and he gets the refund. And you might be asking, well, how is that fair? And there are arguments both ways. I think the IRS's reason for doing it this way is that these are highly compensated. They're all highly compensated employees, right? But they would rather hurt the highest compensated, highly compensated person the most, right? Like this individual is getting, actually, I shouldn't even say that. It's not based on comp, it's based on the dollar amount. So they feel that this individual is benefiting the most from the plan. And even though these lower paid, highly compensated people are causing the problem, they feel it's fairer to hurt the person that benefited the most. All right. I don't necessarily think that that's right, you know, but it does make sense. Like, I would prefer to refund the people causing the problem, but that's just me. All right, so there are ways where you can help solve this problem. You could forcibly limit or put a plan limit. So within your plan document, you could have a provision that says that highly compensated employees are limited to a certain percentage, right? Instead of allowing them to put in the maximum dollar amount, you could say, well, we're going to limit all the highlies to 5%. All right. And then they literally just couldn't, they'd be held back from deferring too much, and then you basically are preempting a failure by limiting them, right? So, for example, again, this works on the whole idea that if you thought that the people that are hurting the test the most should be punished the most. Maybe I shouldn't use the word punished, but those individuals would be these lower paid, highly compensated people. So, for example, a highly paid person that puts in $16,900 and only makes $130,000 is contributing at a 13% deferral rate. That's pretty high, right? And as we saw before, is that type of person is probably going to cause the failure. And so by putting in, let's say, a 5% limit on this person, they're not able to cause a failure, right? That would then go back to the other guys that are not hurting the test, So this is one way you could solve a testing problem each year without having to refund, right? Effectively, they can't put in as much, which is just like getting a refund pretty much. It's just the timing of when it's taxable, but this is one way it could be done. I said 5%. In this example, it has 7, but same idea. You put in a specific percentage limit into your plan document. So this can have some benefit to the catch-up contributions. We're all used to thinking about catch-up contributions. Again, a catch-up is for somebody that's age 50 or older for a particular year, they can put in an extra amount, and that limit does change each year. For 2022, it's an extra $6,500, which means that if you're turning age 50 at any time this year, your total limit is actually $27,000. And that excess from the under age 50 limit is $20,500. So that difference there is the catch-up, what we call the catch-up. However, that's not the only type of catch-up. That $6,500 catch-up could be created anytime an IRS or a plan limit is exceeded, like the 7% limit we just mentioned a minute ago. And also, catch-ups are not counted in the ADP test. So, putting in formal plan limit basically can create smaller passes and failures, right? And you have more predictable results in your ADP test. And it tends to, limit the individuals or affect the individuals who are probably causing your failures to begin with, right? Now, just to show you how the catch-up, what we're talking about with this catch-up treatment, if you have a limit, right? So, again, we have our lower paid, highly compensated employees here. And, if we're limiting them to 7%, everybody's limited to 7%, right? It's just that because as a percent of pay, even though John is putting in $17,500, he's still under 7%, right? And we assume that Steve and David are over 50. So they can put in the full 7% plus the catch-up, okay? Because the catch-up's not counted. So, if they wanted to put in extra, they could put in extra up to the 6,500, right? And you don't catch this, you don't count this catch-up. Now, why is there a catch-up? They're not over, they're not over the 20,500, but they're putting in more than the 7%. And under the IRS rules, they say anything over a plan limit, like 7%, you can count as a catch-up. You don't have to worry about this for payroll, too. If everybody's brains are spinning right now thinking, how am I going to handle that in payroll? You don't have to handle this part in payroll. When we do the testing at the end of the year, our systems automatically compute what part is catch-up and what part is counted in the test for you. But that shows you some of the benefit. We limit the people that are probably going to hurt the test so that we pass, and then they can get that amount plus the catch-up into the plan. All right. So you can also cure. So if you're not going to refund, the plan can also decide, I'll make an extra employer contribution called a QNEC, and we're able, again, by IRS rule, to count these extra contributions as if they were employee contributions, right? Which increases the averages for the non-highly paid people. And then we can get a plan to pass by an employer deciding, I don't want to refund, I would rather contribute more money to my non-highlies until I pass the test. And again, Nova can do that calculation for you. The issue there is that unlike your employer matches in your plans that might be subject to a vesting schedule, right? QNX are always 100% vested immediately, you know. So a lot of employers, A, they don't want to contribute more, and B, they don't like the idea that their employer contributions are not subject to a vesting schedule. So a lot of times we don't see employers being interested in this particular solution. The other thing you can do is, you know, we need to find some way to increase the participation by the non-highly compensated employees. Again, this is a participation test, and the IRS would prefer that everybody participate at a fairly equal rate, you know, both the highlies and the non-highlies, right? So, you know, work with your investment advisors. If you have not had educational meetings with your employees, you know, recently, we run across employers that have never had these types of meetings, right? Like to show employees the value of saving for retirement and you know, the power of compounding growth in the stock market, right, over time, so that they have something to retire on. I mean, there are ways to show people the benefits of saving into these plans. And if you're not at least having at least one educational meeting every year with your investment advisor to come in and help with this, also your investment companies, whether it's Hancock again or Empower, they're happy to come out and do meetings with their employees as well. But the whole idea is to get them to be aware of the plan, the benefits of the plan, and kind of get them excited about contributing to it. That'll help raise your average. The other way you can do things is to maybe, if you're making a match, you might look at your formula, and are there ways to restructure your matching formula to entice people to contribute more? And I'll show you an example of that in a moment. You can also add automatic enrollment, which is a feature that you can, a box that you can select in your legal plan document. We'll talk a little bit about automatic enrollment and how that works, but basically if somebody does not make an election to contribute to your plan, then your plan document would have a percentage that they are automatically enrolled in. So you would sort of force them into the plan at a certain rate, right? And then along with automatic enrollment, you can also increase that automatic rate each year if you want. Again, these are optional features, just giving you some ideas. So what's an example of how to look at your matching formula, and could I make it better in such a way that I entice people to put in more, right? You know, if you have a formula, for example, that's dollar for dollar, 100% on the first 3% that an employee puts in, right? The same cost formula, right, in terms of the maximum amount that an employer would have to come up with, would be a 50% on the first 6, right? The amount that the employer is going to have to contribute out of pocket is the same for both of those formulas. But formula number 2 is motivating people to put in 6% to get the maximum match, right? So 100% up to 3 is motivating people to just put in 3%. It would be much better for this test if they put in 6, right? Again, we're trying to get that average up. So, your matching formulas are going to be discretionary, and you can come up with almost whatever formula you want. So start thinking about that. Like, how can I change my matching formula that I'm doing now to maybe motivate a higher rate of contribution from my non-highly paid people? Another type of solution is to change your plan design altogether and become what we call a safe harbor plan. All right. So there are two varieties, and both varieties involve a specific type of employer contribution formula. But we have a safe harbor matching variety of safe harbor, or what we call the non-elective safe harbor. If you commit to these types of plan designs for a particular year, and it is a year-to-year election, you get an automatic pass on the ADP test. So even if you had a small company and none of your non-highly compensated wanted to contribute, your highly paid people could still put in the full $20,500 for this year, even if the rate was 0 for your non-highlies, right? You don't have to pass this test anymore. So what formula do you have to comply with? The safe harbor matching, the basic one, you can do more than this if you want, but the basic formula or the minimum amount is 100% of the first 3% that an employee puts in, plus another 50% on the next 2%. So essentially, if a person contributes at least 5% of pay, they're going to get a 4% match if you do the math on that, right? So if you're thinking about how much that might cost the company, it's 4% for each employee that contributes at least 5. Okay. The non-elective contribution formula is 3% to every eligible. Okay, and this is whether or not they participate at all. So a match is exactly what it sounds like. It's like, Mr. Employee, if you contribute, or Mrs. Employee, if you contribute something, I'm going to contribute something as well as the employer. For the non-elective variety, all you have to do is be eligible. So 3% goes to all of your eligible contributors and non-contributors. So it's a lower percentage, but it's going to go to more people. All right. Again, part of the price you pay for an automatic pass on the ADP test is that, number one, these contributions are 100% vested immediately. If you contribute the money and somebody terminates tomorrow, they take it all with them. Also, you have to commit to the formula for a 1-year period. All right. You can get out of it year to year, but before the year begins. And like, if you're in the middle of a year and you try to get out of your commitment, you can, but then you're subject to the testing again. And you also don't get your employer money back that you contributed up to that point. So it really is a 1-year commitment. There's another type of safe harbor that goes along with automatic enrollment. These are not that popular at the moment, but basically it has a safe harbor matching formula of 100% of the first 1% and then 50% of the next 5. So again, if you do the math, the formula is a little bit less, like it caps out at 3.5% instead of 4. But you are forcing people into the plan, right, with the automatic enrollment, even though you're giving them less as a commitment on the match. Quite often these can be more expensive because you've got more people contributing, right? But one of the other advantages is these particular safe harbor contributions are not 100% vested immediately. They vest quickly, like they're 100% after 2 years. But if you have a very high turnover company and you want to have a safe harbor plan, at least people wouldn't take all of their money until year 2. Now, if you are thinking about maybe becoming a safe harbor plan to solve your testing problems, there are some other rules you have to follow. you can't become a safe harbor matching plan in the middle of a year, right? So we're in the middle of 2022 now. You cannot make an election to become a safe harbor matching plan right now. It would be effective for 2023, and you'd really need to tell your NOVA account manager so we can get your document amendments and other setups completed with your investment providers, by November of this year. So, you'd be safe harbor for 2023 and not subject to the testing until then, but we need to know by November this year. And then there's an annual notice that you have to give your individuals in December of this year, indicating that you're going to be safe harbor for next year. You do have to notify them, okay? That's for the matching. Now, the non-elective variety, again, the 3% to all eligibles, can be adopted mid-year. That's a fairly recent change. And it can actually be adopted retroactively as well. Rules are a little bit different, but if you want it to be a 3% non-elective safe harbor plan for 2022, you have to make the decision by November of 2022, and then you could, we would make your plan safe harbor, but retroactive to the beginning of the year. So it's not like, oh, I'll just pay 3% from November to the end of December. It doesn't work like that. If you're going to adopt this, you're going to get 3% on the whole 20. This is a typo. This should say 2022 comp. So, you become safe harbor for this year. You get 3% of pay on total gross for the whole year of 2022. You actually, if you were failing the test for last year, okay, you could actually have become a safe harbor plan retroactively to 2021. The IRS does make you contribute more, though, if you're going to do a retroactive safe harbor plan. They make you contribute 4%. So if we were in February of this year and you were failing your ADP test, you could have decided to become safe harbor for 2021 and then make the 4% contribution. Again, a lot of companies, that's a pretty hefty contribution, and most companies probably would just opt for the refunds instead. But it is an option, just so you know. One of the other services that NOVA provides that can maybe help you decide, should I become a safe harbor plan or take some other action? If you want to know how you're doing on your ADP testing in the middle of the year. So we're in 2022. We don't actually perform the 2022 test until 2023, right? NOVA. But if you want to get an idea of how well you're doing, like, do I expect to fail this year? We could provide an optional mid-year test for you. All right. And what we do is we will be sending emails out to everyone probably the middle of this year about this optional testing. Again, it's not required, but if the information on am I passing or failing would help you make decisions and be useful to you, we can do it. There are additional fees that apply, and we would get some mid-year like year-to-date census data, let's say from January to June, and then we'd annualize it and run the testing, and that gives you a pretty accurate idea of, are you going to pass or fail for this year? And then you could decide, well, should I become safe harbor? Should I not? Do I tell my Hileys that to expect a failure, right? Sometimes it's nice to alert them. But if, when you see the email later this year and you want to partake in this optional testing, just let your account manager know. All right. Like the mid-year testing also does have some other benefits. Sometimes we will notice, oh, we've got a failing test, but there are some elections within your plan document that could be changed potentially to improve things. So along with the testing, we run some scenarios on things that might help the testing. Without getting into the boring details, there are some different testing methods that can be used, but we have to make the election to use them before the end of the year, right? So it does us no good to do the testing for 2022 next year because we can't change the document retroactively for some of these methods, right? So again, we talked about formal plan limits. If you want some of those, just contact your Nova account manager. One of the methods I did use one time to help a client, they did mid-year testing, and we changed the testing method from a current year method to a prior year. And because their participation was improving over time, changing the method actually got them from a failure to a pass. And we were able to make that change because they decided to do the mid-year testing, and we were able to make the change, before the end of year deadline. So the change is the amendment that we need. So, all right. Let's see here. A few tips here for updating your limits in payroll. Let's see, how are we doing on time here? All right, we're doing good. Again, the new limits for 2022 for employee contributions are $20,500 if you have an under age 50-year-old person, and it's $27,000 if for any individual turning 50 this year or older than 50 this year. So you don't actually have to be 50 before you put in the 27,000, so long as you're going to turn 50 at some point this year. So if I turn 50 in November and I feel like putting my full 27,000 in the first quarter of this year, I can do that. Okay. So in your most payroll systems have a spot for entering these limits, or they do it automatically for you. But I would check to make sure your limits are set up correctly. We do monitor this at Nova, right? So if for some reason somebody goes over these limits, we're able to catch it when we do your testing and then issue a refund for that particular limit. But it's better if your payroll systems catch it and the error never occurs, right? Another point here is that the limit applies to the combination of pre-tax and Roth. So Roth deferrals are the after-tax deferrals, right, in most of your plans. So you want to add those two numbers together and then apply the limit. It's not a separate limit for each one. Okay. There's also, this is the one that's missed the most, is there's a maximum compensation limit. And so for 2022, that limit is $305,000. So for 401k plan purposes, we cannot count more than $305,000 for calculating any type of employer contribution or anything else we deal with in the plan. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you have an owner making $1 million a year. For plan purposes, he's limited to $305,000. So what does that mean? It affects your matching formula, basically. So to give you a couple of examples, if you happen to have a matching formula that's dollar for dollar on the first 4%, the maximum dollar amount any person should ever get is $12,200, and we get that by taking 4% multiplied by 305,000. All right. Most payroll systems do not put this limit in automatically for you because plans can use any variety of matching formulas, so they have no way to calculate it. This is something that you would put into your payroll system. Another example is similarly, you have a 50% on the first 6% formula. That caps out at 3%. So if you take 3% of 305,000, you come up with 9,150. So you want your payroll system to cut off highly paid individuals at these limits, right? But not at the moment they make the $305,000. That's not where you want to cut them off. You cut them off at the dollar amount. So the minute you have a highly that hits 12,200, they stop. The match stops. Not the employee piece, but the match. Same for this one. The minute they hit 9150, you stop the match. We have seen a lot of payroll systems that are set up wrong, and they stop the match the minute someone hits $305,000. That is wrong. That is wrong. I mean, imagine I'm a highly paid person, and I didn't decide that I wanted to contribute at all during the year until the fourth quarter. And I made $500,000 at that point. You know, it would be unfair to not allow me to contribute at all, right? Because I hit that limit or receive any match. I mean, so if you've got a payroll system that works that way, you need to fix it, because that's not the way it should work. So a quick reminder again, for CPA credit, if you're CPAs, there'll be a evaluation form that's sent, and just return it and you'll receive your certification within a week. I don't know if we have any questions at this point.
Yeah, we have one that came in. They asked, can you please outline the parameters for a qualified non-elective contribution when the intent is to limit the maximum employer contribution, specifically a bottom-up qualified non-elective contribution?
Okay, yeah, so again, in order to solve, and this may be too technical for most on the call, but if I want to contribute more as a QNEC, right, and count it as a employee contribution in order to pass my ADP test, there are a couple of different ways you can allocate the contribution and amount. You know, to see, this is about now how much do I give everybody and who does it go to, right, out of my non-highly paid people. And there is one method called the bottoms-up method, where I'm not going to get into the boring numerical example, but you can within certain limits pick some of your less paid or lowest compensated non-highly compensated people. So if I ranked everybody by compensation, I could start at the bottom of people in terms of how much they made, and if I'm going to give them, let's say, 3% or 5%, I could start with that group, right? Because obviously, 5% of, $10,000 is a lot less money I have to cough up as an employer than 5% of a, 90,000. So you do have some flexibility in who gets the contribution, but there are some other complicated rules. There are limits. You can't just give one person 100% of pay and get by with it.
Okay, and that's all the questions that we have coming in, Steve.
Okay, well, thanks for attending. Sorry we were late on our webinar, but I think we kind of rolled through it pretty quickly here. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me at the number and email here, or contact your Nova account manager if you're thinking you might want to become a safe harbor plan, or add automatic enrollment, some of these things that require a plan amendment. Those are the individuals to talk to so that we can get that all squared away and in place for you.
Alrighty, perfect. Well, thank you, Steve, for your time today. And thanks everyone again for joining us. Just a reminder to fill out the survey at the end of this webinar, so that we may track who will be needing a certificate. If you have any questions, please be sure to email us, webinars@nova401k.com. To view any webinars you may have missed and the recording of this session, you can follow us on our YouTube channel, which is Nova 401k Associates, or visit our website, which is www.nova401k.com/webinars. Thanks, everyone. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day.